The reason you attended the reunion is beyond me. This is all that someone like you deserves. Tiana pointed at a dry, hardened white roll and slapped her fist down on the table. The other students started laughing when they heard what she had to say. How utterly immature they were. I had intended to discreetly inquire about her well-being and depart if nothing untoward had transpired. However, I had other plans after this. I worked my way up from being a middle school graduate for this reason. The next day, as I waited in the president's office, Tiana arrived. I had heard she was the head of the sales department at Ellison Trading. It was probably why she was entrusted with such a crucial deal worth $600 million. "Excuse me, I'm looking forward to today's meeting," she said. "Likewise," I replied, though I'm sure she didn't expect to see me. It must have been hard for her to process. Tiana tried to say something, her lips trembling, but I spoke first. "Thanks for the dry white roll yesterday. The $600 million deal is off the table. I'm Hector Eldon," I continued, 40 years old. "I'm the president of Eldon Trading, a company engaged in a wide range of industries, including energy, steel, automobiles, and food. We generate annual revenues exceeding $1 billion and have nearly 100 subsidiaries, making us one of the top corporations in the United States." I paused, then added, "But despite running such a company, my highest level of education is middle school." There was a clear reason why someone like me, who had come from such a low social position, ended up as the president of this vast enterprise. My parents were far from responsible or decent. Their constant arguments and chaos at home left me with no real place there. "Why don't you earn more money instead of spending so recklessly?" they'd say. On particularly bad days, my parents would take their frustration out on me. The school or neighbors would sometimes contact CPS as a result. I lived a life bouncing between home and a foster care facility. School didn't offer much refuge either. "When are you finally going to replace those ragged clothes? Did you actually get your parents to sign this time?" Coming from a troubled household, my appearance was often shabby, and I rarely had the supplies I needed. I became an easy target for ridicule in elementary and middle school. While a few classmates spoke to me, they'd quickly scatter whenever a more assertive kid approached. Among them, Tiana stood out the most in her disdain. "You, sitting at the same table as you for lunch is enough to ruin my appetite." Her father was a doctor, and her mother worked at a major trading company. She came from a family of elites. With her excellent grades, athleticism, and polished appearance, Tiana probably saw me as someone from an entirely different world, someone incomprehensible to her. "Why is someone so pathetic even in this class?" she'd sneer. "Don't you feel embarrassed?" Whenever she looked at me or hurled verbal abuse, it was always with a disgusted expression. I never said a word back to her blatant harassment. As a leader-like figure in the class, she freely mocked me, who was at the bottom of the social ladder. Her parents' close connections with the school meant that teachers rarely reprimanded her harshly. On the other hand, my parents' reputation was nothing but trouble, leaving no one to defend me. All I could do was endure the daily harassment. But that didn't mean I ever accepted that life. To escape my parents and live independently, I knew I had to fend for myself. That's why I decided to start working after graduating from middle school. I sought advice from a teacher at the facility where I occasionally stayed. "Hey, I want to start working after middle school." "Working? I really think you should at least go to high school." "No, it's fine," I replied, though I didn't share my real reason. I wanted to live without relying on my parents. The teacher listened patiently to what I had to say. Although I was nervous about becoming independent as a teenager, my overwhelming desire was to leave home as soon as possible. Perhaps the teacher understood my determination. When I couldn't decide where to work, the teacher offered a suggestion. "How about working in a factory? It's less about socializing and more about being diligent and consistent. Some places even provide dormitories." So, when I graduated from middle school, I started working at a factory. Luckily, during my job search, I was offered a position at a factory with dormitories, so I moved in and began working there. The factory I joined was Upton Foods, a company that produced food products. The work involved tasks like adding ingredients or setting up equipment. It was simple, repetitive work, and I didn't have to interact with people much. So it was perfect for someone like me who just wanted to focus on the job. I continued working at Upton Foods for a while, and during that time, I met a man in his late 20s who often chatted with me. "Hey, good work today, Hector." "Thanks, Cody." His name was Cody. Unlike most of the quiet workers who preferred to keep to themselves, Cody was easy to talk to. He was a bit sloppy and carefree, but he didn't harass me, and for that, I was grateful. Wiping the sweat off my forehead, I headed for a break, and Cody walked alongside me. "Did you hear we're getting a new employee soon?" "Really? Hope they're not a pain to deal with." With such idle chatter, we made our way to the break room. Working and chatting with Cody during breaks had become my routine. As the days passed in this monotonous rhythm, I started questioning myself. Was it really okay to continue living like this? At first, I was just desperate to escape my parents and the foster system and work hard. But now that I had achieved financial independence and was away from my parents, I found myself with time to think. So, I began to question whether this was the right thing for me. Should I keep working here forever? Cody looked at me puzzled for a moment, then replied, "Well, that depends on how you look at it." "How I look at it?" "Yeah, someone like me, who just wants an easy life, thinks this kind of simple work is perfect. No need to think too hard." He laughed as he spoke, clearly uninterested in climbing the ladder of success. But hearing his words only stirred more doubts within me. Was I really okay with ending my life as a factory worker? Was I fine with being looked down on by my former classmates forever? Cody seemed content with his simple job, satisfied to take it easy. But I wasn't like that. I wanted to gain power to prove myself, if only to show Tiana how far I'd come. What's the best way to seize real power? After starting my job, I began looking into different paths. I couldn't forget the days of bullying and harassment. My desire to get revenge on her had turned into an unshakable obsession, and so I came to the conclusion that the only way to achieve my goal was to start my own company, grow it into a major corporation, and succeed through my own efforts. Someone like me, a middle school graduate, had no chance of landing a job at a large corporation, let alone climbing the ranks to an executive position. It was a harsh path, but starting my own business was the only way forward. Are you serious about starting your own business one day? Yeah, I'm serious. Well, I won't stop you, but don't overdo it, okay? Cody offered me a warning, undoubtedly out of genuine concern, but I knew that I absolutely had to prove Tiana wrong. I began paying close attention to everything happening in society. When the right opportunity came, I quit my factory job and launched my own company. The first business I started was called Eldon Steel, dealing with raw materials like steel. As I continued managing the company, Eldon Steel seized opportunities and began to expand rapidly. The number of employees increased steadily, and the company grew at an astonishing rate. "Mr. Eldon, there's a message for you." "Thank you. I'll take a look." With the support of my employees, I continued expanding as the president of the company. When it came to management, I sacrificed sleep to chase opportunities. I wasn't afraid to make investments when needed. Over time, the number of subsidiaries grew to nearly 100. I eventually rebranded Eldon Steel to Eldon Trading. "Mr. Eldon, is something on your mind?" My secretary's voice interrupted as I gazed out from the chairman's office window overlooking New York City. "No, I was just reminiscing about the past." From this high vantage point, it was impossible to tell if people were walking on the streets below. Perhaps Tiana had once viewed me as just an insignificant speck beneath her notice. Driven by an obsession to climb to the top of society, I had pushed Eldon Trading to incredible heights. Now, having risen from president to chairman, I had reached the pinnacle of my career. I've really come a long way, I murmured, gazing at the sprawling cityscape. My secretary might not have understood the full meaning of my words, but it didn't matter. Now that I had reached this point, my thoughts turned to those classmates who had bullied me. What were they up to now? One day, I received an invitation to a middle school reunion. A reunion. Yes, what will I do? It seems someone had organized a long overdue reunion, and they'd sent me an invitation. Why not attend? It could be a good opportunity. My secretary didn't know about my elementary and middle school days, so I guess I just gave a bland answer. I suppressed the urge to scoff at her casual suggestion. Still, I thought it might not be such a bad idea. Yeah, maybe I will. It's a chance to see how everyone's doing. Curious about my old classmates, I decided to attend. Now that I was chairman, I had come to appreciate the importance of connections. Although my school days were far from rich in relationships, I wondered if attending the reunion might help rebuild or create new bonds. The reunion was held in a banquet hall at a New York hotel. When the day arrived, I donned a suit and attended. Long time no see. Hector. Yeah, it's been a while. Is everyone here? Quite a few people showed up. Here's your name tag. Thanks, appreciate it. The former classmate who served as the receptionist took a slightly formal tone. She probably remembered that I used to be harassed, so she may not be able to gauge the distance between us as to how to respond. As I pondered who to approach first, a familiar voice called out, "Long time, no see, Hector." The man wasn't someone who had bullied me. It was more like he had been unable to stand up to the more aggressive classmates. Yeah, long time, no see. Good to see you doing well. I didn't think you'd come. Well, I figured I'd take the opportunity to see how everyone's doing. I kept the conversation light. While we chatted, others occasionally joined in. No one openly bullied me anymore. After all, we were all adults now. In my younger days, I would have struggled to hold a conversation, consumed by fear of retaliation and my weak position. But now I was different. With this newfound confidence, I found myself able to casually chat and exchange small talk as an equal. I see you now hold a senior position in that multinational corporation. Yeah, I was lucky to get in. I just had my first child recently. I spent some time catching up with various classmates. Having never had true friends before, it felt novel and refreshing to talk to peers who didn't know about my career. For the first time, I felt as though I was living an ordinary life. Eventually, it was time for the meal. The seating arrangements were at the round table, and the seats had already been assigned. I sat down where my name tag was. It seems to be a style in which meals are brought to the table. In front of me, I was quite used to formal dining occasions by now. What was different from usual was that I was looking forward to having dinner with my former classmates. From now on, however, as dishes were served one after another, all I received was a dry, hardened white roll on a plate. Nothing else came. What on earth is this? As I frowned, a woman appeared, smirking. Long time no see, Hector. It was Tiana, the very same person who had mocked me all those years ago. Even after 20 years, her mean-spirited nature hadn't changed. What made you think it was a good idea to show up at this reunion? Sure, we sent you an invitation, but that was just to notify you that we'd be having a reunion without you. She spoke arrogantly, making it clear that the invitation had been nothing but a cruel joke. I really don't understand why you bothered coming. Someone like you deserves nothing more than this. With that, she slammed her hand on the table and pointed at the dry roll. Hearing her words, others at the table began laughing. A few exchanged uneasy smiles, perhaps wondering if such childish antics were appropriate at their age, but no one dared stop her. For a while, the hall echoed with laughter. It was truly childish. If nothing had happened, I had planned to simply observe how she was doing now and leave quietly. But after being treated like that, I had my own plans. After all, I had clawed my way up from a poor and broken household for moments like this. An idea for retaliation quickly came to mind, and it was a perfect opportunity to settle this. With a determined expression, I stood up and responded to Tiana. I'll be sure to take it home and savor it. Enjoy every bite. I wrapped the dry roll in the napkin and walked away. Tiana sneered, letting out a derisive laugh as I left. Some classmates laughed at the scene, while others watched me leave with concern. The next day, I was in the chairman's office, waiting. An opportunity for payback was fast approaching. Today, an employee from Ellison Trading was scheduled to come. Let me know when they arrive, I told my secretary. She tilted her head curiously. To see you directly, Mr. Eldon. Shouldn't they go through the sales department first? No, I want to handle this personally. The relevant department was already informed and warned that I would be dealing with this matter myself. Though I couldn't forgive what happened yesterday, I had calmed down. Something as petty as that could no longer hurt me. Instead, I felt pity for her. Even after 20 years, she hadn't grown or changed at all. For now, I asked my secretary to step out as I waited in the chairman's office. Tiana from Ellison Trading arrived. I had heard she was the head of their sales department. It made sense that she was entrusted with this high-stakes deal worth $600 million. Excuse me. Thank you for meeting with me today. Of course. The moment she saw me sitting behind the executive desk, her face froze in shock. She had assumed she was being summoned to the chairman's office of a major client, only to find me waiting for her there. There was no way she could immediately process the situation. Hector, it's been since yesterday. What she thought was a routine business negotiation had turned into a nightmare when she found herself face to face with me in the chairman's office. Her lips quivered as she tried to say something, but I spoke first. Thanks for the white roll yesterday. As for this $600 million deal, consider it canceled. Wait, my business here is done. Why? How is it possible that you, Hector? She stopped mid-sentence, the realization dawning on her. The name of the chairman of Eldon Trading, her most important client, was the same as the one she had mocked and humiliated years ago. Do you still have something to say? It must have finally hit her. The person who had risen to create one of America's leading conglomerates was the very same classmate she had scorned. Her complexion grew pale. I deeply apologize for yesterday. It would be a tremendous humiliation for her to apologize to me, but she begged for my forgiveness. A $600 million deal wasn't something that came along often, and her career, reputation, and position likely depended on its success. But why should I care about her circumstances? As I said, the deal is off. Make sure to let your bosses know as well. Wait, at least hear me out. And why exactly should I listen to you? I glared at her, and she pressed her lips tightly together. It wasn't as though I had any desire to reconcile with her. I don't want to see your face again. If she had just left me alone yesterday, none of this would have happened. But she had gone out of her way to prepare that dry, hardened roll to humiliate me. Why should I waste my time listening to someone like her? Then she suddenly grew defiant, snapping at me, "This deal is beneficial for you too. Just listen to me for a moment." Do you really think so? I retorted. There are plenty of companies your size. Any of them would jump at the chance to work with us. Bringing personal feelings into business, that's no way for a chairman to act. Maybe you should remember your position. A grown woman still pulling childish pranks on others. A company that trusts a $600 million deal to someone like that can't be trusted. I'd say that's more than enough reason to cancel the deal. Her shoulders trembled as she stood there, unable to refute me. If she had enough common sense to recognize the truth in my words, she wouldn't have resorted to such petty behavior in the first place. Either way, just hear me out, she said. I'm sure you'll change your mind. She must have been desperate to salvage the deal. Without waiting for permission, she began pulling out materials and launching into her presentation. How ironic, considering she had once claimed she couldn't stand being in the same space as me. Tiana passionately presented her pitch to me, explaining that by forming exclusive contracts with our subsidiaries, they could deliver high-quality products with remarkably short lead times. Perhaps under other circumstances, her presentation might have been impressive enough to sway me, but knowing her true character, I had no interest in listening. Competence at work is important, but there are qualities even more essential. Looking down on others without hesitation, mocking and belittling people. Even after 20 years, there was no way I could entrust a $600 million deal to someone like her. And that's why we believe your company will be thoroughly satisfied with our services, she concluded. Maybe she thought a solid explanation would earn my approval, or perhaps she believed her professional skills would make me respect her. But she had conveniently ignored all the harm she had caused. While those incidents might have seemed insignificant to her, for me, they were memories I'd rather forget. I waved my hand dismissively. Thanks for the presentation, but I have no intention of dealing with you any further. Please leave. Her face twisted in frustration as she glared at me. What's wrong with you? Did you even listen to me properly? I'm saying it's not worth listening to. I can't trust that you'll approach work with integrity. Shut up, I said coldly. She looked as though she was about to cry, but it was her own doing. Did she even realize what she had done back when we were students? Or yesterday, for that matter? Let me be clear. This deal is off. I looked at her with cold finality. As I spoke, her shoulders slumped, and she muttered, "Thank you for your time today." She turned and left, dejected. I didn't know what awaited her when she returned to her company after failing such a critical negotiation. But the thought of her, the person who had tormented me for years, facing a scolding from her superiors was oddly satisfying. Is it petty of me to take pleasure in the idea that she might finally understand what it's like to feel powerless and humiliated? Perhaps. A week later, I proceeded with a business deal that I had been personally overseeing. This was completely unrelated to the matter with Tiana. From that point on, Upton Foods would operate under the umbrella of Eldon Trading. Yes, we look forward to working with you, I said, confirming the details. I had acquired Upton Foods, the factory where I had worked after graduating from middle school, and had been discussing the deal with the factory manager. The employees at Upton Foods were initially shocked to hear about the acquisition. However, after hearing the explanation, they seemed to accept it. No one chose to leave. But why the sudden interest? One of them asked. Eldon Trading already owns numerous food factories, doesn't it? You can never have too many factories when expanding a business, I replied. Besides, I have great trust in your leadership. I see. Well, we truly appreciate your decision to not only maintain employment, but also raise wages, the manager said, smiling. The employees were thrilled. Later, I toured the factory. This place, which had once felt like one of the few places I could call home, had naturally changed over the years. As I walked through the factory, I unexpectedly ran into a familiar face. Hey, is that you, Hector? It was Cody, the one who had been with me back then. It seemed that Cody was still working at Upton Foods, even after the decades since I had left. He recognized me immediately. Yeah, it's me. Long time no see, Cody. Man, it's been ages. That suit. Don't tell me you actually became president like you said you would. I'm more of a chairman now. His eyes widened in shock. Wait a second. Eldon Trading. That's buying us out. Are you saying you're the chairman of Eldon Trading? That's right. The business I started worked out pretty well. Wow, you really pulled it off. Never thought you'd go this far. Good on you, man. Cody was one of the few people in my life who had treated me with kindness, as both a colleague and a friend. It seemed he'd continued working at the factory, leading a simple and steady life, just as we had talked about. "So, what made you decide to buy this factory?" he asked. "It's useful for expanding the business. Food factories are always valuable for growth." "Yeah, but don't tell me you got nostalgic or something." I didn't respond immediately to his teasing, but it was true. The factory did hold a special place in my heart. Cody was also the one who had treated me without division. The Upton Foods dormitory had replaced my home when I had nowhere else to go. I couldn't deny that I had become nostalgic. "Maybe you're right," I said with a slight smile. Life had thrown plenty of hardships my way, but even amidst all that, there were people who had helped me. I didn't just want to use my power to retaliate against those who wronged me. I wanted to use it to repay the kindness I'd received. There had been tough times, but I realized it was these people who had made the difference. "That's why I'm here today," I said, feeling a bit embarrassed, but also genuine. "I want to give back to this factory." Later, I had the chance to reunite with my parents, whom I hadn't seen in years. They had eventually divorced and returned to their respective hometowns. First, I went to visit my father. It was the first real conversation we had in years. "Long time no see, Dad." "Yeah, it's been a while." The man who had once argued with my mother daily was unrecognizable. He had aged significantly, but the aging had mellowed him, allowing us to have a calm conversation. When he saw me, his eyes narrowed with nostalgia. I thought I saw a hint of tears welling in his eyes. "You've grown so much." "Yeah, I'm sorry, I only ever caused you trouble." Perhaps it was only in his later years that he realized the importance of this child. I wasn't ready to forgive the painful days so easily, but family bonds aren't easily severed. No matter how much resentment I harbored toward my parents, I knew I had to take the first step. We exchanged a few words. "You're working properly now, aren't you?" he asked. "Yeah, I am." "You seem to have made something of yourself, and that's good to hear." I didn't mention that I was the chairman of a major corporation, but knowing that I was no longer struggling seemed to put him at ease. Even having this brief conversation was meaningful to me. Next, I visited my mother's home. She, too, was living modestly. When she saw me, she teared up slightly. "I'm so sorry for everything we put you through." "It's all in the past now," I replied. "Thank you for coming to see me." She, too, regretted the days when she and my father constantly fought. Having aged, she had come to realize how foolish it was to neglect connections with loved ones. I shared some updates about my life with her. It might not be possible to rebuild the relationship we once had as a family, but cutting ties completely would feel like a waste, I said. The idea of living together again might be unrealistic, but maybe we can repair our relationship enough to avoid any lingering regrets. I had finally taken the first step toward that. It was around a week after the $600 million deal had been canceled when, as I was heading to my car after finishing work, a familiar voice called out, "Hey, Hector." It was Tiana, of all people, approaching me. Her self-proclaimed elite status had made her showing up like this entirely out of character. Her desperate and unrestrained behavior caught me off guard. My eyes widened in surprise. "Hey, listen to me for a second." "Listen to what?" "Come on, we're friends, aren't we? The least you can do is stop and hear me out." The word friends made me frown. Did she feel no shame in using such a convenient term only when it suited her? Friends? Huh. That's quite bold of you. Have you ever once truly thought of me as a friend? Of course I have. Really? Is serving a dry, hardened white roll at a reunion your idea of a friendly gesture? If that's how you treat your friends, you should have gone the extra mile and prepared even more pitifully hardened white rolls for the occasion. My retort made her grit her teeth, yet despite being mocked, she showed no signs of backing down. "Look, just hear me out. I have a great offer for you." As always, she was focused only on self-preservation. Still, If she insisted, I figured it was time to set the record straight about everything she had done to me. So the only reason you're coming to me now is for your own sake, isn't it? I'm guessing this is because your position is at risk if this deal doesn't go through, right? It seemed I had hit the nail on the head. Her normally sharp tongue had failed to produce a quick reply. You're not here to plead for protection after all the harassment you've done to me, are you? Seeing her rendered speechless felt oddly satisfying. I sighed, looking at her as she struggled to find the words. If that's all you've got to say, I'll be leaving now. Wait, they said I'd be demoted if the deal falls through. I see. A $600 million deal naturally came with significant responsibility. It made sense that her company had assigned it to her as a department head, but failure clearly meant she would have to shoulder immense consequences, possibly even a demotion. I guess the situation really is such that relegation and other things are possibilities. And why is that my problem? I replied coldly. Help me, she audaciously pleaded. Her request nearly made me laugh. How many times had I wished, as a child, that she'd just leave me alone? If it were a simple request for help, I would have asked God 1,000,000 times for it. And yet, if someone like her could find salvation after all she'd done, this world must be incredibly forgiving. So, will you apologize for everything you've done to me in the past? I asked. Don't pretend you don't understand the things you've put me through. Her painted lips quivered. You told me not to come to school. You harassed me. I listed her offenses. Her face turned pale as I recalled the cruelty of her actions. The words she had hurled at me were utterly inhumane. How could she have said such things so casually? Tiana probably realized at that moment that apologizing was her only option. But would such an apology even feel genuine? I'm so sorry, she said, dropping to her knees, her eyes pleading with me. Tiana had always been prideful. She wanted to make the deal a success, even if it meant kneeling outside. It was likely the most sincere apology she could muster, but I had no intention of forgiving her. If you can stoop so low to apologize now, you should have thought twice before resorting to petty harassment. That won't be enough for me to forgive you. Don't ever speak to me again. Hey, I've apologized so much. I thought you were going to forget for me. I never said I would forgive you. You need to truly understand the gravity of what you've done by facing the consequences. With that, I got into my car and left. She continued shouting in the parking lot, but as passers-by began giving her strange looks, she eventually gave up and left. As expected, Tiana was demoted after the deal was canceled. The $600 million deal had been crucial to her company's future. That's probably why she came forward to me, out of pride in her elite status. But she probably didn't expect to be held accountable for the misdeeds she had piled up. Apparently, due to the failure of this business deal, Eldon Trading, the company she worked for, was still in the red. The weight of her responsibility caused her to be cold-shouldered within the company, forcing Tiana to voluntarily resign from her position. She tried to find another job, but it seems that her bad reputation, stemming from her failure in a $600 million deal, had spread. Despite once calling herself an elite, Tiana was unable to find new work and now faces the humiliation of being disowned by her own parents. Meanwhile, some classmates I exchanged contact information with after the reunion reached out to apologize. Sorry, Hector. I wish I could have stood up for you back then. With Tiana acting the way she did, it couldn't be helped. I could understand. They must have feared becoming her next target. Even though some of my classmates recognized the harassment as wrong, they just couldn't bring themselves to stop it. I can't say I've forgiven everything from elementary school and middle school or the reunion. But hearing their apologies like this is enough for me. Let's go grab a drink sometime. We can talk more then. Yeah, that sounds good. A friend answered me with a smile. This was what I had hoped for when I decided to attend the reunion, to rebuild connections and make new friends. The idea of organizing a trip with a friend felt rejuvenating in spite of everything that had transpired. It may seem odd that someone who has made a name for himself as chairman of a large company would be excited about planning with a friend, but this is exactly what I have been craving. I have the impression that I have finally crossed the starting line in my life. I'll embrace a life free from the bonds of my past and go forward, enjoying every step along the road, from the youth I never had to the family I could one day start.